recording. Also wanted to say that, like I mentioned, the grant management and financial recording requirements will get you a little bit familiar with that. Sorry about that little hiccup there. All right. Next, I think we were here. Suggestion, like I said, too many cooks, too many irons in the thing. You need to designate one person, one department that's going to be responsible for collecting everything, all the moving parts, all the pieces, and assembling it, and having a designated person. Grant writing is definitely an excellent capacity building asset to have in your organization. Recruiting somebody with that skill set, or sending somebody to training to learn that. And it just takes repetition. It's kind of like, the muscles in your body, you use them enough, you build that muscle up. Same thing with grant writing. You get enough experience, you learn how to flex that muscle and go after the funding that you want or you need. As I mentioned earlier, this training, it's provided to give the basics of grant writing and other considerations of grant management. And like I mentioned earlier, consider taking a formal grant writing class, or do your own further research from the resources that we will provide. This is my wife. We were in Colorado, and we up there taking pictures and taking everything, and she noticed that I was too much into my phone trying to send off pictures and stuff like that. And we seen a very appropriate image up there in the mountains, and it said, "Be here now." So we're here in the moment, we're here in the grant writing session, and we're in our own little bubble. So we're going to run with that. Let's see, where to begin, where to look, where do you look for funding, for the opportunities that are right for your organization, your community, or your tribe. It's just such a vast expanse to cover, and you have to narrow it down. So basically it all begins with an idea. You guys may be sitting at lunch, you might be talking with your coworkers, or maybe talking at home, and crazy idea pops up. Hey, I'd like to write a grant for that. I'd like to do this, or I'd like to see that happen. Maybe we should go talk to our tribal leader or boss and give them our idea. But that's how a lot of these things begin. The ideas, don't ever underestimate your ideas or your dreams. Think about an idea that you've had, or you've been a part of a discussion, and you want to do this for your community. You see a need, you see a shortcoming. Our leadership, they cannot think of everything. They can't always be all inclusive, and it takes all the people from the community, different groups, different facets, to bring those ideas to the front. So you've got this idea. What do you want to do? I want to build a park, I want to build a wellness center. And you have to think, how do you envision this making a difference in your community, your tribe, or those that you want to impact? You want to a certain subculture of the population, or you want to have an impact. You want to see a better health outcomes, more access to fruits and vegetables, or healthier outcomes, longer life. Those are things that any community, anybody would want for the well-being of their people, their family. And it boils down to, so what? What makes your dream or idea unique? What is it about it that's worth funding? And you have to think, what is innovative or novel about your idea? Ideas come about every day. You have to think outside the box. You have to think about how you're going to advance your idea, your program, or your dream forward. And it takes a lot of moving pieces, and it takes a lot of effort. So, you have to kind of do an assessment. Just like with ourselves or our community, our organization, you have to look at your resources, your strengths, your assets. You know, it all starts with having a good foundation, a good base to start with, you know, and if you don't have it, don't give up. You know, there's always potential. You have to look at that, but you have to look at your organizational history of grant administration. Has it been successful or not? If you've had shortcomings, you know, what are you guys doing to address that and make it better, to strengthen that? Or if you've already had a successful organizational history, you know, that's great. That's you know, a notch in your belt. Looking at staffing, your personnel, key positions. If you want, you know, to do a wellness program, you know, what kind of staff do you have in there to help treat that? Exercise people, doctors, nurses, wellness coordinators. You know, how are you going to have those folks? You also have to have, you know, support staff, administrative staff. You know, there's just a lot of pieces around there. Finance, keeping the funds moving, coming in and going out, and you know, that's a very important aspect of funding, and also the evaluation of your program. How are you gonna, you know, demonstrate to your funders, to your community, to your staff that the steps that you're taking and the processes that you're going through and the outcomes justify, you know, your efforts. So that's where your evaluation portion comes in, and that's a very important piece as well. And I think it's getting you know, quite a bit of attention, in my opinion, about the importance of it. You know, there's starting to be different evaluation methodologies that are being applied to you know, program goals and objectives. The other thing, space. Where are you going to put your program, your staffing, your equipment, you know, your activities? Think about your target audience. Where are they located at? You know, and the placement of your program or your organization, you know, your resources, and how that connects with who you're serving. You know, and already if there are existing programs, partnerships, collaborations with other organizations, county or state health departments, tribal coalitions, or tribal and university partnerships, you know, there's no limit on the partnerships that you guys can come up with, you know, and I always see it as not a bad thing, not a challenge, but an opportunity to see the various creative ways that you can find common ground, despite how, you know, different it might seem, you know, where you're coming from. So having, you know, support and partnerships and collaborations, that's a very important aspect of it. You know, having the support of the community is even better. And that leads me to the tribal or governmental support, you know, from a policy aspect of grant support. Your organizational policies, are they friendly towards implementation or expansion? You know, having a governmental support, you know, having policies to advance your initiatives, you know, for wellness, for healthier outcomes, or for better education outcomes, whatever, but having policies, you know, having policy oriented people from within that can help you to develop those so that it benefits, you know, for the greater good. So that is a very important aspect of it. You know, lots of opportunities, but you also have to look at challenges you may have. There may be a lack of support. You know, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have enough information about a particular area or topic, which is why they're maybe not supporting. So maybe educating them more about, you know, the aspects of what you're trying to do, or the outcomes, what could be. There also may be tribal matching shares that are required for funding. It just depends. We'll get into that whenever we start delving, taking a little bit deeper dive. Some of the other challenges could have been negative audits on the tribal finances. Sometimes tribes, direct service tribes, may have finance problems and having to overcome negative audits. It's definitely doable and it just takes time, but like with anybody, it just takes time, and it is not an obstacle that's etched in stone. And the other thing is, maybe the department of the tribe or the area doesn't have a history, or they lack grant experience. I'm sure that there are other challenges that maybe you guys could think of. It could be location, it could be COVID, it could be a lot of stuff. But a suggestion here is, if you have a challenge, what are some possible solutions that you could implement to overcome those challenges? When I was younger, I'm still young. When I was younger, my older brother, he had been in tribal administration for a while, but he was somebody that when I'd run into obstacles, I would come to him, and he came to me at the point, or he talked to me at one point and told me, whenever you have a problem, and if you're going to come to me, he said, try to come up with some solutions on your own, think about solutions and bring them up. If you have a problem, come up with a solution, be solution oriented. So, these challenges that we may have with grant writing or, getting that started, they're able to be overcome. So don't get discouraged, and, be optimistic. Because things get tough, things get muddled down the road, but you have to keep your eye on the ball. As you get ready to move forward with grant writing, some questions that you might want to ask yourself, as an organization or as a tribe, your eligibility. Is your organization, your tribal government, or your agency, are they even eligible to begin applying for grant funding? Some things may have hindered you, or maybe you don't have the correct status, or maybe it's just not a good match, in which case, maybe there are grants out there that will match up to your eligibility. So don't, like I said, get discouraged. A lot of times these grants, government funding, federal funding, they're specifically for tribal governments or, whatever, but in the eligibility requirements, it'll be spelled out what the requirements are, or the eligibility requirements are. Also to ask yourself, do you have the necessary and qualified staff to carry out your program goals or objectives? If you have a nursing shortage going on in your state, your region, and finding qualified medical staff could be a challenge. Especially if you're getting a grant for direct prevention or a nurse position or something to do in your program, for chronic disease. Having staffing is vital to the success of your funding, your programming. You have the staffing, the services and processes to implement if you do find yourself funded. You need to be able to hit the ground running, building up your staff, developing your services, having your, standard operating procedures to implement, with your finance, with personnel, with hiring new staff, job descriptions, having that infrastructure developed when you're funded takes a lot of work. A lot of times that first year is a building year, and you have certain benchmarks. You got things that you need to get accomplished before you can advance into that next year. Other important questions to ask yourself is the grant that you're applying for, is it appropriate for the population that you're serving or that you're trying to reach? Just make sure that it's a good match. It's important for you to know the population that you've identified and that you're working out of. Just know the ins and outs, demographics, all kinds of things about it. Know who the gatekeepers are, because you're going to need their help. Let's see, what to consider when you find a grant you want to apply for. You know, the eligibility, that's going to be in one of the main things that you find, you know, is if your organization or tribal government, does it fit the eligibility of the funding opportunity announcement. Some of these acronyms we have a resource. We've got a glossary that we're gonna put out there as well, share with you guys, that's got definitions for a lot of these things that we deal with, matching shares, you know, financial readiness, everything. So we'll get you that resource as well. You know, like I mentioned, the grants may require a matching share. You need to be ready for that. Talk to your tribal government, tribal leaders about that, so that you know, authorizations can be made to make sure that those funds are available. Requirements, having your organization, does it have the infrastructure or capacity to carry out the requirements of the grant? You know, just being ready to hit the ground. Your financial readiness, does your organization have the capacity to maintain the detailed reports necessary for reporting requirements? Having a competent, qualified finance, you know, is very, very important to having that, and having a good relationship with your finance department is very important as well. And having key staff or personnel, I think we've talked a little bit about that, and being able to recruit them, having job descriptions, requirements, making sure that they're in compliance with, you know, clinical, federal, you know, state, local, you know, requirements. Let's see what we got here. Oh, backward. What does a grant or funding opportunity look like? Does not look like that. That is actually my granddaughter. Her name is Eleanor. If any of you guys ever wanted to see a little Cheyenne baby in a cradle board, there you have it. She was about, I think she was about 6 or 7 months old, but my namesake, that's his first daughter. So my father made the cradle board, and that's an heirloom that's in our family. We've got pictures of all the grandkids in that. So we're going to look at funding requirements, funding opportunities that are out there. Tribes, you know, we look at a lot of different stuff, not just federal. There's also non-governmental and foundational. Robert Wood Johnson, there's equity, there's a host of private and foundational grants out there that you can research, find resources for, you know, and look what their requirements are, their initiatives. They may be out to help, you know, health literacy or rural health, you know, it just depends. So definitely having somebody in your department or your organization to get out and research those things, those opportunities out there, and bring them for consideration to the group, to the tribe, to, you know, for consideration. Federal ones. This is kind of the one that we're going to delve into. Let me see. We are going to actually pull this up. No, nope, that didn't work. Hang on a second here. Okay. How do we get here, Aaron? Am I still sharing? Is this grants.gov still coming up on the? Okay. Switch. Okay. I'll share, and I'm gonna pull another one up here. Okay. IHS. Yep. All right, guys. Grants.gov. Whenever we look at you know, funding, federal funding, grants.gov, usually kind of comes to mind. It's searchable. There's a ton of opportunities in here. You can do keywords off here to the upper left. They've got tabs you can do, learning about grants, grant reporting, grant programs, all kinds of stuff, terminology. You can search. There's tabs here for the applicants, grantors. I don't want to go through the entire system, but everything that you would need for your grant management should be found here. And we'll kind of play around with this a little bit. We're going to type in tribal health in that search engine, see what happens. There was a community health aid program, the assessment and planning. I'm just going to kind of dive into here. There's a ton of, if you look at the opportunity numbers that they go by here in the left column, what the title is, the opportunity title, what agency it's coming from, whether it's IHS, CDC, NIH, what kind of opportunity status, if it's been posted or if they're forecasting that it's going to be funded, then they'll put it up here. And they also have the posted date when it closes, when the grant closes. So we typed in tribal and health. One of the things I wanted to pull up, I was looking at this last night. Is that thing still up? Is it? Okay, good. Here's kind of what a grant opportunity looks like whenever you're out searching for opportunities and grants. It may pull up something like this whenever you want to look at it. You view it. Got the opportunity number, the HHS 2021 tribal assessment and planning. It's got the title of it up here and who it's from, DHHS and IHS. And you can look. It's a grant notice. It's got all that information here. It's a discretionary grant. The CFDA number, catalog of federal domestic assistance, how they keep track of this is right here, the number that you can pull it up. I mentioned earlier there was a cost sharing or matching requirement. No, so that's a good thing because we don't have to put forward put up funds. And then it's got the total amount of funding, which is very, very important, and then award ceiling up to what they're funding. So if you come on down a little bit, it's got eligible applicants. If you look here, Native American tribal organizations, other than federally recognized tribal governments, others, to be eligible for this funding opportunity, it's got all of the criteria, federally recognized Indian tribe, 25 USC. A lot of times tribes, you can just go in there and you can see. I don't know that they fund state recognized tribes. They may not. I don't know. I haven't heard of any, but I know foundational grants, they may. There's definitely funding out there for non-state recognized tribes as well, though. But the eligibility, additional information is important to understand. And then the agency name. It's got the purpose of the funding, the description and purpose of this. It's to support planning and assessment for implementation of a grant. These version history, just different versions that they've come out with, different documents, how different grants that may be related to it. But the package, once you get ready to dive into this, you found a grant application, a grant funding announcement that you're interested in. You want to look at the package, and it's got this information down here, opportunity package, when it opens. This opened on August 5th of 2021, closes 9/6, which is not too far away. So we're not going to apply today. We're going to preview, and it's got some information here, agency contact person, who can apply, organization applicants, and you can download the instructions, I would say. But all these other forms that are involved in this, like the application for federal assistance, it's kind of like main page that you look at. Let me see. If you will notice, it's got, what type of application. This is the application for federal assistance, your SF-424, and it's got a lot of the pertinent information. If it's your first time applying, you would check new, or if it's a continuation grant, that, you would know that, or if it's a revision, but all this pertinent information, tribes usually have their federal entity identifier number, what their name is, the legal name of the tribe or organization that you represent. It may have your EIN, your employer identification number, taxpayer information. The DUNS number, organizational DUNS, my understanding, and I think I've got a slide in here about it, is that's going to be redundant after a while. It's going to go away, and there'll be a different unique entity identifier, universal identity identifier, or something like that. But it's got all the information, your address, where you're at, where they can find you, where the feds can locate you. Make sure you give them your chairman's name. No, I'm just teasing. But contact information for your grant writer, person submitting the grant, I'm sure, number, contact information, all that stuff. Other type, what type of applicant are you? And there'll be instructions that correspond with this that are highlighted, or oftentimes these yellow boxes, maybe drop-down menus that you can fill in. A lot of this information, it's got the FOI. So these are all just pertinent information details that you'll see. Estimated funding, we'll get into that with the budget information, what type, when the funding year information is. Just a lot of details. Your congressional district, if you guys don't know what your congressional district is, where you reside or where your service area that is going to be providing services at. I know at the congressional level, they do pay attention to this. With the funding that we manage, the Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country, the first project period, we got some inquiries at our, from I think our senator or representatives for the state, but we did have to provide them with an update. And, so they pay attention. Don't think that they don't. I think it's good to kind of toot your horn and be prepared, be happy to share that information with them, because they can make or break, or those things can play a definite role. Hang on. Okay.
Are you being a wild baby? That's okay.
Let me see. Stop share. Hang on a second. I lost my screen. Just a second. Okay. Can you see that screen back now? Okay. Okay. Just a little bit of basic information about your organization, about your budget, about what you're applying for goes in here. And getting your signatures, your authorized representative. They're going to need to know who within your organizational structure is the AOR, the authorized representative on record, to sign off on that. Sometimes they can be signed off electronically. Other times you may have to get a document for that. So that is that part. Let me see, back up here. Where are we at here? Hang on. Budget information, yeah. Let me see. Go back. Okay. So this is the rest of the information that they're going to be asking in the grant package. It's got a list of everything that you're going to need to submit for that. Your project performance site location. These are just forms that you can fill out electronically and then upload to Grant Solutions project narrative. We're going to get into all of these documents, lobbying disclosures, disclosure of lobbying activities, because, you know, tribes, you know, a lot of, at our level, you can't go out and lobby, but you can advocate. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And other attachment forms, that might include letters of support. You know, there might be you know, some clarifications that you needed to make, you know, with some of your forms that were requested. So definitely not anything to stress about. I think maybe your first time going through something like this, it's my suggestion is to have somebody seasoned that has done this before, that they can watch over your shoulder and just tell you, yeah, you're doing right, you know. So, and just try not to stress it too much. So, I'm going to close that out. So that's the grant opportunity. That's what that page looks like. Let me see, how can I go back to my presentation? Wrong one. Wrong one. Yeah, is that the one? Is that the federal funding opportunities one? Okay. I keep looking that way. It's because I'm looking at Aaron. He's helping me. So once you find your opportunity, not on it. Okay. Okay. Hang on, guys. No. Hold on just a second. Hold on. Which one am I on? Hang on, technical difficulties here. How do we get past that here? Just a second here, guys. Okay, here we go. Where's my presentation at? That one? No. Share screen. Do I need to do share screen? Let's see, not that one. Screen 2. That one? Yeah. Is that back at the beginning? Okay. Hold on here. Hang on here. Help me out here. Stop sharing. That one. Oh, okay. See if we can go back through here. All right, here we go. Talked about a letter of intent. Sometimes whenever grants come out, when they drop, they may ask for a letter of intent. A lot of times it's you know, simple letter of intent, you know, such and such organization, you know, this is our area, we're interested in applying for, you know, such and such grant. And basically the reason why that they request those is to try to garner how much interest they're going to have and how they need to plan accordingly for that, for the response to the grant application. Consider making your grant application unique or different. You know, you thinking about outside of the box on the approach, how you're going to approach a particular situation or scenario, or address a particular problem. You may consider utilizing cultural-based practices or other unique approaches. Interventions that are linked to holistic wellness or prevention are worth looking into. You know, instead of healing just certain aspects of a person, you want to work on holistic wellness, healing the whole person. And also grants that are unique to tribal people, tribes, communities for various initiatives. There's like the Native American Agricultural Fund, there's state arts councils, A&A grants that are, you know, you can go after their funding as well if it suits what you're looking for. And also underserved populations or those that may have unique challenges. You know, those are things to leverage on your behalf to go after funding to have a really good chance at it. Not a guarantee, but it's all about your approach. Kind of getting into the grant part, some of the elements, you know, that we've seen to a successful grant proposal, having clear goals and objectives, being clear about, you know, your approach, that they're based on existing best practices or cultural-based practices. Cultural-based practices if you don't have best practices to fall back on, including but not limited to existing research or science with the best practices. Making sure that your budget is reasonable and justifiable. You know, you're not exorbitant, you know, about paying your staff, you know, or having, you know, a souped up delivery van or something like that. Just being prudent and reasonable, you know, making good use of your funds and not just, you know, stretching it, and making sure that everything's justifiable, that there's, you know, logical explanation for what you're asking for, even if the number sounds a little bit crazy. If you can justify it, you know, if you can sell the idea to them, you know, it can be done. And also these novel or unique in approach to your grant proposal. If it's not been done before, but it's within the realms of reality, you know, or if it's definitely unique in your approach, like maybe using technology to help sustain language or something like that, or to reach, you know, a younger population through the use of technology. You know, sky's the limit there. And making sure that all of the instructions within the grant application guidelines were followed, you know, for a successful grant proposal. Following the rules, very, very important. If they tell you to make it in 8 font, you know, 8 point, do it in 8 point. You know, you'd be wondering why, can't even see it, but, you know, but if they ask, follow the rules and do everything to the T. Include, you know, your letters of support or resolutions of support from your relevant administrations, and making sure that the evaluation of your program is clear and unbiased. You know, don't slant it. Having that part of being unbiased is very important. Also, you know, you're thinking outside of the box. My presentation keeps falling off. Oh no. Okay, see that now? Nope. Okay. Thinking outside the box might include reaching a population that you've not reached or tapped before. Maybe it's like I said, a youth group through the use of technology, or maybe it's something rural, you know, rural part of your community, your tribal nation that has a hard time accessing technology or services, or, you know, having barriers to their doctor's appointments, you know. Having a novel or unique approach, like I said, like I mentioned, and also if it's timely or appropriate. You know, who would have thought, you know, when GWIC was coming out, Good Health and Wellness in Indian Country, the round 2, we were in St. Paul, Minnesota in February, the latter part of February. And I don't even know if COVID, I guess it was on the radar, you know, there was some talk about it, but it seemed like, you know, not long after that, middle of March, you know, I remember watching a Thunder game and then canceling the game, and COVID, you know, I guess the reality of everything kind of came, and, you know, we started shutting down and doing telework, and And, you know, when you start thinking about all of the funding that started coming out to address COVID, the PPEs and plastic safety barriers and masks and all of those things, but also, you know, how do we continue on with what needs to be done, you know? So having unique or novel approaches to addressing that on how to move forward, you know, would be really good to look into. And also having your program able to translate to other programs or initiatives. I think that, you know, with COVID and that safe distance, social distancing and masking up and immunizations, you know, how that can translate to whether it's a health program or a culture program or something clinical, but, you know, having that ability to kind of translate, it's very important. And also, you know, something that I'm big about is the sustainability aspect of your program or initiative. You know, if that funding went away, how's this going to keep going? What are you going to do? You know, is it another program going to pick it up? Is your, you know, administration going to fund it? You know, you know, the sustainability aspect, we were able, here in Oklahoma, we went and visited one of the tribes, and they had noted that they were in a food desert. And, you know, one of the things that they did, they got a little bit of funding, but they built a hydroponics and an aquaponics, as well as a greenhouse. They started having all kinds of initiatives to increase fresh fruits and vegetables and access to food, so they didn't have to drive, you know, 40 or 50 miles to the next community to get those things. So, you know, they grew it here, grew it there. And, you know, they've got this program going on that is just absolutely phenomenal. And the sustainability aspect of it, you know, whenever they're planting, you know, teaching the kids how to hunt, how to gather, and how to grow their own food. You know, you think, I guess the saying, you know, you give a man a fish, feed him for a day, but you teach him to fish, you feed him for life. You know, so the efforts that they're putting forward in the youth, the children, you know, with the culture and how it ties back to culture, you know, edible foods and foraging and how to hunt, you know, and how to preserve, you know, they're giving them these tools so that, you know, if their funding ever went away, they have a way to sustain it. You know, these initiatives that they've come up with will continue on and hopefully get passed down to the next generation. So, you know, it's things like that you know, I think are of interest to take note of. Using cultural practices is really good, or, you know, even if it's not necessarily Native American, having something that's been around in that state or community for a while is very important. I am stuck. Just a second here. Hang on. Hang on there. I need your help again. This thing, is that screen up now? Help me again. Yeah. Is that it? Okay. Huh. My screen is all right. This kind of breaking up the monotony a little bit. I know you guys are probably tired of looking at screens and letters on a little screen. This was out at Cheyenne and Arapahoe a few summers ago. One of the initiatives they started doing was to take one of the buffalo from their herd, and they would bring in elders and children, and they would talk about this buffalo and the role that it played. And this is out at the Indian Nation powwow grounds, and they brought this buffalo in, and you know, everybody's kind of wondering what's next. That old guy in the middle with the ball cap on is my dad. So this is what everybody was looking at. They put down a buffalo and they educated them about the cultural, I guess, the nuances, the role that the buffalo played in our culture, and the sustainability aspect about it. It's not like, we've got buffalo roaming free in Western Oklahoma, but we do have a bunch of cows out there. No, I'm teasing about the cattle. Having these buffalo, they fed our people, they sustained us, and these skills that go with managing that herd. And once you open a buffalo up, you just can't start hacking at it. There's an art to taking out the different parts that are used for different reasons and how to go about that. So this is kind of a sustainability aspect of it. And if you think about it, this was, our Walmart on the plains at one time. They used everything for that, in that. And it's good to see these younger people getting in there, taking that hideout. At first, when they first started out, it was, and even if you look at that girl in the upper right hand corner, she's got her hands like she's ready to reach out and grab her some spleen or some kidney or something. But they did a lot with these hides, with the hides and the meat, and the different parts they use for ceremonies. I can attest to that this buffalo was used in a really, really productive way. Elements of a grant application. I know we have to get back to this stuff because I would love to be out at the powwow grounds rolling in a buffalo hide, but we have to keep things going. We have to go back to the office and write the grants so that we can keep doing stuff like this. But elements of a grant application. There is a title page, cover letter, kind of introduction, who you are, we're applying for this grant, this is who we are. And then after that would be your introduction, your abstract or your summary of your organization, who you are, who you serve, your institutional background, how long you've been in existence, how large you are or small or impactful you may be. If just talk about your organizational structure and maybe setting yourself up for being able to manage this funding. Talking about your problem statement, your approach, your needs assessment, identifying I guess what you recognize in your community, the need that you want to address with this funding. Maybe you're recognizing that there's youth dropping out in the 9th, 10th grade, and you're given demographics about it, and maybe things that lead to it. One good resource that I will give a plug to is you guys should reach out to your respective tribal epidemiology center. There's 12 of us in the United States, but we all cover different areas. Like with ours, Southern Plains, we cover Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas tribes. And there's 43 tribes here. And what we do, I think every 5 years, we do a community health profile for each of the tribes. And basically it's because we have problems with access to tribal level data without an agreement, data sharing agreement. The only data that we can really access is tribal level, but we look at a lot of different layers and different aspects of your demographics for your tribe and the counties that they cover. And we prepare this report and we send it to you guys, to your tribe and your planning departments, your grant writers, maybe your health people, whoever is in charge of coming up with the approach, the numbers approach, the getting prepared and how you're going to go about program planning. That's good, useful information. It's got demographics, it's got county level data, population, maybe resources, clinics. I don't know what else is in there, but there's a lot of information so that it gives you the ability to paint a realistic picture of your community. You know, one of the things that I will say about, you know, whenever you're gonna try to see about implementing a program or, you know, having these objectives for your community, for your tribe, you know, don't be so high up that you're going to say, hey, I've got this funding, I've got this program, take it or leave it. You know, when it comes to actually placing that in your tribe or your community, you know, you have to go and talk to the community. You have to talk to them and understand, you know, how they feel. They may not feel like there's a problem, but on the outside, you know, you can say, hey, I got this data, I've got these, you know, these reports, and this is kind of what it's showing. So can we do something about it? You know, you want to try to get buy-in, you want to get their approval. They want to feel like they have ownership in this initiative, this program that you're doing, you know, and if you're trying to do something with their kids or their tribal members and they're not a part of it, you know, why should they? You know, why should they support you? So you want to try to be inclusive and give ownership, you know, even though you may have gone out and got the funding, procured the funding, and you want to bring it to their community, you know, they don't have to take it. You know, they don't have to want it. But, you know, if you feel like it's a good fit and your job is to go out there and to convince them, and you know, they either can pick it up or they can leave it. You can't force it. So I think I've made my point enough on that, but community engagement, really, really important. I guess maybe because having an anthropology education background and seeing it, you know, from a tribal perspective, we see people coming into our communities all the time, you know, to ask questions, to do surveys, to do research, to, you know, anthropologists, can we come to your powwows? Can we look at your ceremonies, you know, and one day they're going to leave, you know, and same thing with your program, you know, your money that you bring in, your grant, they're not infinite. They may be for a year, they may be 3 years, they may be 5 years. It may be a project period, but you have to kind of think about how long you're going to be there, you know, what kind of impact do you want to have? So that's about what I have to say with you know, getting it into the community and getting buy-in and painting this picture. Your program goals and objectives, what you hope to see through your program objectives, your goal might be to, you know, increase graduation rates for, you know, for kids in, you know, the Thomas Fay and Custer school districts, you know, but how you reach your goals and objectives is very important. And also the management and budget aspect of your grant, how you kind of finesse different aspects of it, the management, the oversight of it, and the budget, how you work it to, you know, giving people incentives, you know, keeping it below a certain threshold so that you're not saying, you know, people aren't saying, hey, Chris is giving away $250 gift cards. You know, I don't think so. You know, maybe $25, but, you know, following the rules, financial sound rules, you know, not being extravagant, you know, and thinking about the long term of the program. If it's a 5-year program, you know, you need to pace yourself. You need to be kind of even, you know, until you get towards the end. Having your staff, you know, working with them and through the budget and getting your objectives done. It's kind of like, way I see it, kind of like an auto mechanic. You got different parts that run your car down the road. You've got, you know, an engine, you've got electrical, you've got, you know, suspension, but it's getting all of those parts to work together to advance your vehicle down the road smoothly, ideally. I don't know, unless you have an Indian car like mine, no air conditioning. um, but, you know, finessing that down the road and having good outcomes, you know. And also looking at the evaluation portion, how you plan your evaluation and your data management. Um, you know, how is it going to be evaluated? How are you going to tell? Are you going to bring somebody from the outside to look at different parameters of your program and how it functioned? You know, that's very important. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, the sustainability efforts or future funding needs. You know, if you delve into a program, maybe a pilot program, and you're finding out that, you know, oh my gosh, there's going to be even more kids dropping out. We need more funding to try to come up with, you know, resources to keep these kids in school, or maybe we need to intervene with the parents and give them better tools so that they can manage things better. I don't know, but how you're going to sustain your funding, your grant, it's good to talk about that in part of your summary, your abstract, how maybe you're going to partner with other programs or organizations to advance what you're doing. You know, maybe you're going to, you know, teach grant writing and get other people build their capacity so that they can apply for other funding. You know, it feeds off of each other. You know, once you get the ball rolling, then you'll keep looking for other opportunities and hopefully make a good thing there. So those are what I consider good elements of a grant application to be mindful of. You know, this abstract kind of starting at the top in an example. This is where you talk about the community that you've identified that you want to work with or that you're going to target. Talk about the community, the population, what's working well. You know, don't talk about the negative at first, but talk about things that are good. We've got good roads, we've got, you know, good transportation system, infrastructure. You know, talk about things that you're going to build off of, and what do you hope to accomplish with your funding. You know, you want to increase, you know, my goal is to see, you know, healthier outcomes for our youth, or maybe we're going to, you know, try to decrease the positivity rates for COVID, you know, whatever. But what are you going to do with your funding? What do you want to see happen? You know, it can be anything, you know, as long as it's related to what your grant is about. One thing that I will say that, you know, with Native people, you know, it's hard for us, you know, we're taught not to talk about ourselves, not embellish yourselves, you keep yourself humble, you know, don't put yourself above other people, you know. But, you know, whenever you're going after funding and you have to talk about yourself and your abilities and your competencies and capacities, you know, it kind of comes up with a conflict. So best bet is just, you know, this is not in the Indian world. It is, but it's not. And, you know, these are things that are required. It's hard for us, you know, maybe get somebody else to write that for you, you know, and give input about it. But it's hard to talk about yourself, you know, and I understand that. So, you know, let's talk about other people, you know, talk about how good they are and the good jobs that they do, you know, definitely. Goals and objectives, be clear in this part, you know, goals, keeping those relevant to each other, goal being overarching, and your objectives on how you're going to get it done, you know, those, being clear about that, very important. And like I mentioned in the last slide, the management plan, main points of your project and how you're going to propose managing it. Are you going to have oversight? Are you going to have, you know, a nurse navigator having oversight over the, you know, prevention aspect of it? But talk about your budget, talk about, you know, spending, what you're going to be, you know, big ticket. Maybe you're going to be buying equipment. Maybe you need to find personnel, recruit. But you know, and your resources, where they're at. You know, maybe there's a college or a university that you're going to tap their research department, or maybe you're going to, you know, work together to do community engagement. I don't know, you know, but there's a lot of different ways and how you're going to manage it, how you're going to build your staff, you're going to build your capacities, and, you know, how you're going to proceed forward over the duration of your project period. Getting back to the evaluation, considering your main points for your methodology and how you intend to evaluate it to ensure that it is accurately and purposefully measured for efficiency. How will you evaluate your program for success or to identify weaknesses and have a plan for improvement? You know, we all, you know, regardless of what we do, we, you know, whatever background we come from, but that evaluation part and how to continuously self-improve your program so that you can be better prepared for things that come up down the road. You know, I would bet money that a lot of programs got caught with their pants down when it came to COVID, and how we're going to go about, you know, doing screenings, doing prevention activities, working with the youth, working with the communities, our elders. You know, all of that stuff got put on hold until we came up with ways to continue forward with that. You know, so evaluation, you know, for your programs, you know, very, very important, and you know, self-improvement, so that when you do go down the road and you look for additional funding, you know, you've got that measure behind you, under you, so that you can springboard off of that and hopefully do something better. Goals, objectives, like I mentioned earlier, two different things. Goals are very general. They're not time specific. They're non-detailed, and they're very broad, very overarching. While objectives are very specific, very measurable, very time sensitive, time bound, and very detailed. You know, and those are how, through the objectives, are how we get things done. Little, you know, what we say we're going to get done, and, you know, we'll get to that here in a minute. So, but that's the difference between our goals and objectives. So you'll get an example here shortly. When we get back, when we go to our objectives, you know, many of you guys have probably had this pounded into you using SMART objectives. You know, we all know the acronym: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. Coming up with your objectives and how they tie into your goals, you know, you need to be specific, detailed, and very defined about, you know, where you're at and how you're going to get there, and, you know, what to expect when you get there. You know, are you going to be competent? Are you going to have the you know, the capacities that are required to continue what you're doing? Measurable numbers, quantification, they provide a means for measurement and comparison, pre and post test, you know, taking, you know, numbers, baseline numbers, lab values prior to your intervention or whatever for clients in a wellness program, you know, or maybe working with kids, having baseline data for, you know, BMIs, height, weight, those kinds of things, and doing your interventions and being measurable, you know, number of sessions that you did, the duration, how many sessions did you put in there, you know, what age groups. Definitely keep as much detail as you can for comparison and down the road, you know, and the attainable. Is it feasible? Is it easy to implement, or is it able to be implemented into the program that you're seeking to do? You know, and is it doable? It may not be doable because of, like, you know, what we just went through with COVID. You know, having games and those kinds of stuff. You know, it wasn't feasible 6 or 8 months ago. You know, but hopefully with vaccinations and FDA approval, we'll be able to get to that point again. But you know, those are things that you need to talk about. Maybe it was, you know, remoteness, ruralness, maybe it was a lack of technology, why it wasn't feasible, but you need to be able to kind of take that into consideration as you're developing your approach and even when you're doing your evaluation. The realistic takes into consideration limitations such as your personnel, you know, your cost, how much it's going to cost to set up this program, and what resources you have at your disposal, and time frame. You know, sometimes you may be working under a carryover grant and you've got a certain time frame to finish out some deliverables, or maybe it's you're trying to hurry up and get funding spent before, you know, a tribal election year because chaos may ensue, or, you know, maybe we're trying to get it done under a continuing resolution. You know, things are a little bit unpredictable, you know, so you have to be kind of realistic in the times that we live in, and be able to apply that whenever you're developing your objectives, and make sure that you're not sugarcoating, you're not being unrealistic, you know, with your expectations. You know, just be realistic about your approach on it, and being time bound, time sensitive. It helps set boundaries around your objectives for planning. Like if you know that one of your objectives is to, you know, develop a policy, have a policy come out of, you know, a meeting with the school board, or how meals are prepared, you know, nutritional meals. You know, kind of working backwards might help you develop that timeline for how much time you need. You know, but you know, or how often are you going to collect data? You know, that time bound is all around there, you know, and how you're going to get things done. So being mindful and sensitive to that time, so that you can get the things done and you're not trying to fit everything into one quarter. SMART objectives continued. Let's see, 28. I'm trying to look at my time. I'm getting hungry. I don't know about you guys. I'm going to talk for a bit more. What exactly for SMART objectives? We're still on those. What exactly is going to be implemented in your objectives? You know, what kind of program? This is where you need to give details. What kind of strategies are you going to use? Are they going to be best practices? Are you going to use cultural-based practices? Are they clinical guidelines? You know, you got to be specific in how you're going to spell that out. How are you going to measure it? How will you know that change, behavioral change, physical change, whatever? How do you know when it's occurred? You know, what markers are you looking for? And are you able to collect those measurements, you know, whenever they come about? Maybe you're going to pull it off of RPMS. Maybe you're going to look at GIPR measures. Maybe you're going to do your own data, your survey results. You know, but when you're going to do that, how are you going to do that? With it being achievable, you know, like I said, can it be accomplished in the time frame that you propose? You know, if you're going year to year with your funding, or if you want to do it in that 5-year project period or 3-year project period, you know, but you need to be able to spell that out, and like I said, work backwards and see if your ideas, if it can be proposed, if it can be achieved in a reasonable time frame, and that you're being realistic about that. The limitations and constraints are understood. You know, if you don't have access to RPMS, you know, that's one of your limitations or your constraints, or maybe the kids are out for the session for the summer, and you can't do surveys. You know, you need kids to do surveys. So, you know, until they come back, you know, that's when you'll do them. Being realistic, are there enough resources available to achieve your desired change or result that you're looking for? Resources could be staffing, it could be, you know, tribal resources. Maybe it's the community hall that you need to host your events, you know, or you know, resources could be a lot of different things, but being realistic and having that in order to achieve what you're doing. And is it possible through the objectives that you're developing? Is that change? Is it realistic? And being time bound, when will this objective be accomplished? You know, like I said, working backwards, if at the end of that 5-year project period, you know, if you want to make that your goal, great, work backwards, you know, and see how much time it's going to take. If you want to do it in, you know, that first or second year, you know, work backwards, find a way that's going to give you a reasonable amount of time, you know, and just be prepared. You know, anything can happen, you know, with, you know, my experience working with my tribe, you know, getting resolutions. Sometimes ceremonies may be going on. There might be a funeral, or they may be traveling on you know, business or training or something like that. But being able to kind of be cognizant of all of those obstacles or barriers to get done in order for you to gather the information that you need and develop these objectives for your project, because you know you want to develop these in a way that your tribal leadership, so that you can get buy-in from them, and you want them to be able to know that this is going to impact not just your community, but your district, you know, your people, your relatives. So you got to have buy-in. With objectives and timelines, golly, I kept pressing the thing about time and you know, having enough time. It seems like, you know, and we all know this, that there's just never enough time. You know, it's something that you can spend it, you can spend innumerable amounts of time on things, but you can never get it back. You know, so using your time, that's probably your best resource, in my opinion, is time. And treating it like it's a precious resource, and using it and managing it in a way that's going to be most effective to you. You know, it's something that takes finesse and it takes practice. But you know, time management, how we made it through school, I have no idea. How this Cheyenne made it through school, I have no idea. Objectives and timelines, you need to decide activities and the time frame required for your activities. You know, if you say you're going to do cultural classes, you know, in your community, how long does it take to get those set up? How much time do you need to get them going, to find instructors, materials? You know, giving yourself enough time to just, you know, work backwards and turn it. The way I see it, this thing is like this huge ship. It's like the Titanic. And you know, if you want to miss that iceberg, you better start turning that ship now. So being cognizant and trying to right that ship in the way that it needs to go. It's not just one person. It takes several of us. You know, it takes several people to make that happen. So under your objectives, decide how and what activities are going to be required to satisfactorily complete or accomplish it, you know. And like I keep saying, working backwards from your objective, given how many steps are required, estimate your timeline, you know, and I talked about all of that, your factors, shipping delays, materials, staffing. And, you know, if you guys can think of any other factors, things that may affect timelines, you know, sometimes people may just need some time to review or read a document that you gave them. So you want to make sure that you give it to them in enough time that they have, you know, ample amount of time to give you, you know, proper feedback, you know, that you'll value and you can apply that. I'm going to jump in a little bit to some of these examples. You know, we talked about goals and objectives and SMART objectives and stuff like that. But, you know, goal, like I said, overarching, lofty, very broad, not time specific, but you want to improve access to fresh fruits and vegetables for community members residing in rural Western Oklahoma. Very broad, you know, western half of the state, you know, not a lot of pressure there, but your objectives here, how are you going to go about improving that access? So you want to talk about your objectives, your steps that you're going to take through to make that happen. One of those objectives might be within 1 year, develop and implement a seasonal community-driven farmers market. That's one of your objectives, to make that access better, improving that access to fresh fruits and vegetables through a farmer's market. Next one might be assessing your community knowledge of gardening through surveys and questionnaires. If community members don't understand, implementing or developing their own garden, or they don't have the common knowledge, required for that, or the resources, you kind of need to know, because if you're going to be trying to do this, it needs to be able to, your population needs to be able to have the foundational knowledge to continue this, and it help contribute to. So having an idea of where they're at in their knowledge, maybe their attitudes, perceptions of community, gardens, or even, home gardens. And the number 3, assisting the community in developing an heirloom seed bank. That could be another objective. You're going to need seeds for your garden. So where are they going to come from? Do you buy them from Monsanto and have to buy them every year, or do you want to do an heirloom seed bank? And you talk about the sustainability aspect of it. So with your activities, how are you going to go about implementing these objectives, and kind of drilling down a little bit more. Your first objective, like I said, within a year, develop and implement a seasonal community-driven farmers market. You start thinking about all the steps just for that. Who's all going to be involved? Do we want to get, land resource management, parks, recreation? Do we want to get somebody from farming and ranch, or what departments, are we going to get involved in this? Do we want to get somebody from the community? Absolutely. Where are we going to put the garden at? Vacant spaces, parks, community areas that can be used. You got to think about the siting of this. Is it central? Is it hard for them to get to? Is there public transportation? Taking into consideration, your objectives and being mindful of the population that you're serving, and maybe they have obstacles that they have to overcome, and you're trying to find ways to make this more accessible so that your objectives can be successful, which will lead to completion of your goal. Looking at siting, what's the kind of soil? Is it does it need remediation? Does it need to be rehabbed? Can we put compost in it? Tons of questions to ask. What permits or siting details need to be addressed? Is it through the city, you're getting a grant, or does the tribe need to do a resolution? But what do you need to do to get this thing, legal, so that, liability, indemnification, whatever, but protecting your project, you might say. And how this is going to be funded, is it going to be different revenue streams coming into it? Are you going to have one major stream that comes in that takes care of it? How often, who draws down the money, who gets the equipment? You got to have a lot of questions to make this objective happen. Your opportunity for partnerships and collaborations, maybe you want to get summer youth workers in to come in, tie in helpers, volunteers, put out, engage your community, give them ownership. This is for you guys, this is your ownership. What do you want in the community? Do you want an orchard? Let's grow fruit trees, you look at the sustainability of farmers markets too. A lot of different aspects. It could be climate change. It could be, air quality. It could be politics. It could be COVID. But how is this going to sustain itself? You always got to kind of keep that in mind as you're developing your programs. The next objective, assessing your community knowledge of gardening through surveys and questionnaires. These are steps that as you develop your objectives and what you want to see happen, these are steps that you have to look at to get those objectives complete. Where will you disseminate the surveys? Who are you going to question? Are you going to stand at the grocery store? Are you going to go to powwows? Are you going to go up to the tribe? Where are you going to get the surveys at? Who's going to come up with them? How are you going to get the questions? Who's going to contribute to the questions? How many are you going to do? You need to look at your population, your community, your demographics. Like I said, our tribal epidemiology centers, the community health profiles that we put out there, we have a lot of demographics, a lot of great usable information that you can use to describe your community. You talk about how the surveys are going to get done. Here of late, we've been working with a lot of our tribal partners when they do surveys. They could be on our website. It could be a paper, it could be electronic. People have done QR codes. Gosh, I see the QR codes at school, and it's scary how simple they are. Tablets, handing somebody a tablet at a powwow, come sit down under the booth and, give us your thoughts about a community garden, or tell us what it was like when you were young. Getting anecdotal information too, maybe from your elders or farmers or somebody in the community that say, maybe they remember that used to be an old gas station or something, or there was something else there, and providing historical context so that it, the meaning of the location, maybe it means more, but collecting usable information about that to paint a good picture about that. You want to make it attractive. How about COVID precautions? Like I said, giving tablets out and passing it around, you don't want to do that. Or even if they're anonymous, a lot of times, these surveys are anonymous. Your information's not going to be shared with anybody, de-identifying that information and keeping those separate, incentivizing the community for their input, maybe having a raffle, raffling off a big ticket item. Everybody that fills out a survey for this can have a chance for, winning half of a beef or a powwow drum or a teepee, but those are things that you can do. Those are little things that can be done in and around that you can help recruit for your survey. Televisions, gosh, we gave televisions away when we were doing our tribal Burfus survey. And how will you evaluate the results of your survey? Once again, it goes back to your evaluator and how are you going to evaluate that? Or will they be shared? Are you going to share them with your tribal leaders? You're going to share them with the community, your funders? I think my opinion, your community is your greatest asset and your greatest resource. They are the ones who you need to convince that this is a winning project, or this should be funded, because they are the ones that are going to be there after you go home at 5 o'clock, or if you live in the community, great, you're vested in the community, but if you don't, they're the ones that have to live there. They understand what goes on after hours or before hours, and they are usually the ones that you go to. And what are you going to do with the results? Are you going to use that to help apply for other funding? Or how you're going to share the results?
Chris,
objective.
before we leave, can I make some comments regarding surveys?
Sure, please.
Give you some time to take a drink and relax your voice. Thank you for the information you've given us thus far. So when you're developing surveys, oftentimes, and we've all filled out surveys before. I was just thinking as Chris was talking, I fill out a survey pretty much every time I go to Whataburger, because on my receipt, if I fill out the survey, then I can get a free Whataburger the next time. And what do I notice about filling out that survey is I really don't even read it. I just click buttons so that I can get to the end. Chris had mentioned the incentives, and yes, that is a great way to get numbers of respondents to your survey, but you don't want to be coercion. You want them to understand that the survey is actually very important and that this is information that is needed. So in order to do that, you want to make sure that the survey is, number one, easy to read, right? You want to make sure that people can understand that. And we talk about the certain grade levels that you want to write a survey at. And usually it's around 8th grade reading level. You also want to make sure that the survey is relevant to the individuals that you are targeting. Because if there's no relevancy, then you have the people that just go and click, check the boxes, and it really can make a mess of your final results. It doesn't necessarily give you the viewpoints or the opinions of the population, but rather someone that's going through the survey very quickly. One of the things that I've also noticed with surveys is that the length really does matter in this case. You can have surveys that are just a page long, a couple pages long. When you really start having multiple pages and 20, 30, 40, 50 questions, you and I both know that once you start getting past a certain point, you start to lose interest and you just start checking boxes again just to get past the survey. So it's really important to just understand that the surveys are great. It's a great way of collecting some quantitative data, but there's also certain things that just to be aware of. Oftentimes early on, we would develop surveys and we thought they were fine and we'd send them out to the communities, and sometimes people just wouldn't understand what we were asking, the questions that we were asking. So I would highly encourage a kind of an introductory paragraph of what the survey is, and also restate why it's important to that person that is filling out the survey, why it's important to them, their community, their families, etc. Set that you want them to fill out the survey because it's important, not because of the incentives that come afterwards. All right. But again, I think it's very important to have those incentives, but it's a fine line. You just want to make sure that you are getting the survey results that are honest, truthful, and of value to you. And lastly, when you're developing surveys, don't let the survey be something that's only yours. Before you distribute to the communities, have people read it and have them give honest and critical feedback. This is not a time for hurt feelings. If it doesn't make sense, then let that person know. You want to know that if your survey doesn't make sense, because again, that can skew your data, and people can check yes when they actually meant to check no. For those that remember our multiple choice questions that we had during school, they would throw these tricks in there to make a positive sound like a negative and a negative sound like a positive to make sure that you read the question. You don't want to do that with communities, right? So just let other eyes look at it and give honest and critical feedback to you, and be willing to change. Be willing to change your question in order to get the responses that you want, or the information that you want from the question. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Lancer. Yeah, you guys are going to hear from Lancer quite a bit tomorrow as well. I've been working with Lancer, golly, 20 years. We're not going to say how old we are, though. Objective 3, like I was talking about, the survey, very, very important, definitely after you get it checked and rechecked, get it, like you said, don't be afraid of getting your feelings hurt, with the data that you collect and how it's laid out there, and it's the only way that you're going to improve is if, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, sustainability, yes. Looking at the heirloom seed banks, who will have access to the seeds, that's kind of a big thing right now. There's a big initiative on seed banks. I think there's 1 or 2 that have been damaged, world seed banks, and they lost some really important seeds or came close to losing some, but those things are very vital to the survival of nature and humankind, in my opinion. How this is going to be sustained, it kind of takes care of itself as long as you nurture it, you take care of it with the seed bank. So keeping those heirloom seeds in your communities is vital. Lancer, does this look familiar? Aaron? We're getting close to lunch, and I mentioned I'm getting hungry. We were up in Minnesota, up at the casino, but we went for dinner one afternoon, and we noticed the ladies on the table next to us, these Indian ladies, they had hamburgers, and man, they look good, the hamburgers, and so we're like, we'll have what they have. And they brought us, these are fry bread hamburgers. So anyway, getting close to lunch, guys. I hope that doesn't tempt you. Good stuff. I keep talking about timelines. Maybe I've got something in my own life going on with timelines, so feeling pressured. No, everybody's looking at me. No, timelines, it's one of those things that takes practice and foresight, as well as many other factors, to successfully and effectively implement a timeline. It just takes practice. It takes finessing it, and even the best laid plans sometimes will go off to the side. So don't take it personal. It's not the end of the world. If you're lucky, everything will go as you wrote it. I doubt it, but if it does, I'm happy for you. There's external environmental factors that can definitely and vastly impact your timeline. COVID, I keep returning back to that. Like I said, don't stress it too much. Just be vigilant, keep pushing forward. Do your due diligence regarding your project or your grant, making sure that your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed, and that's probably the best thing you can do, is just do your due diligence and know where your standing is. Takes practice and finesse to make everything happen. You may have to go work things to make it happen, to advance your objectives or your grant. Kind of like, here's how I put it. It's like being an orchestra conductor, having various instruments, and up to you to make the appropriate reflections depending on where things are in a given grant or funding year. Everything goes right, you'll have some beautiful music. If it doesn't, it'll sound choppy, it'll sound ugly, people will be out of beat. So that's kind of how I look at it, is you're the conductor, and you know when to bring, different sections up, for clarity and for emphasis, and it might be financed toward the end of the year, or it might be your policy midway through, but bringing them to the top whenever they're vital to make that impact. And like I said, keep alluding to, sometimes the best laid plans can be changed overnight. Obvious example is how COVID-19 affected our world. Like I said, we went to dinner that evening. It was like a Wednesday or a Thursday, and the Oklahoma City Thunder were getting ready to play, and we're watching them bounce the ball and dribble and practice, and then all at once, everybody's leaving. That's like, what happened? And COVID, that it happened. So, suggestions on timelines: start early. Start early on your objectives and your activities related to it. There is a such thing as too early, but definitely give yourself plenty of time so that you're not stressing it. I don't know. I've been working on my presentation a few days here, and I think it was Monday night. I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was having a dream about my presentation, and there were like a lot of slides missing from my presentation. There were some links that were gone, and it was bad. And anyway, so this morning I woke up at 4 and started going through my presentation again, just to kind of make sure that I didn't repeat my dream. Do your research on what is required so you don't have any last minute surprises. I mentioned your due diligence. If you need to have permits, if you need to have notice periods, publishing periods, things may have to be published for 10 or 12 or 25 days. There might be staff shortages or even tribal politics. During COVID, we were working on trying to implement a program, and you need staffing to develop a program, and it was during COVID, so there was definitely a shortage of recruiting qualified, competent nurses, because they were so busy with being on the front lines and given vaccinations and whatnot. Other issues that might plague you could be politics, tribal politics. I'm not saying that it's bad or negative, but it may be an election year. They may be out campaigning, they may be politicking, and they're not there. So you got to kind of work around that. Be mindful of certain things that are coming up. Ceremonies may throw you off, funerals, there's a lot of different things that can kind of offset your best laid plans. Lay out all your deliverables, estimate how long your activities may take, and be generous about your time frame. Definitely pad it. If something you think is going to take a day, give yourself 3 days, but know that you're not having to stress it. My experience at your initial notice of award, when that comes in, review all of your deadlines, any special conditions that the funding agency may have outlined, and get them taken care of. Start early, highlight them, lay them out, do whatever it takes. My suggestion, use a project board or utilize some type of project management application for that. We use one here at the organization called Monday, to manage our projects. We've also got, project board that we utilize for different activities that we may have going on. Communication, just communicating with everybody, with your staff, with your supervisors, with your finance, having a good, clean, clear line of communication. Maybe even have weekly, production meetings, talk about what you're having obstacles on, or maybe you've got ideas of maybe how it's going to transform what you're doing. But definitely communicate, and work on your communication. Not everybody communicates in the same way or fashion. There may be differences in the way that we perceive or how we communicate. So be prepared for that. My suggestion is find somebody that can facilitate a communication workshop for your staff or for your organization. That communication is key. That way you don't have miscommunication or under communication and things fall to the wayside. So I don't know how much more to stress that. Going back to that, we'll get off this eventually, but the goal was to improve access to fresh fruits and vegetables for community members in rural Western Oklahoma. And, objective 1, you're assessing your community knowledge of gardening through surveys and questionnaires. Are you going to do that monthly, quarterly, annually? How often are you going to assess their knowledge? Are you going to do pre and post? And who's going to do that? You have to have somebody designated that's going to be, firm, fair, and consistent. I'm sure you've probably heard that before about collecting that data, so that down the road, when you do it for comparative purposes, it's consistent, it's even, there's no anomalies about it. And that you have to come back and say, oh, I forgot about it, so we're just not coming back to take care of it, but just make sure that it's done, implemented, and executed on, like clockwork. So designate somebody, a coordinator, support staff, a data entry clerk to collect that data or to input it, and make sure that it's kept. Let's see what we got here. Budget. I'm going to look at my time. 11:52. We got about 8 minutes. I can go a little bit further. I'm going to be running short on slides afterward, but we're going to have Lancer and Aaron that's going to jump in Aaron's looking at me like a deer in the headlight look. So, but we're after lunch, we're going to be, we'll come back after this, but I'll delve a little bit on the budgets. Purpose of this, your section on budgets, very, very important. I mean, especially now, there's a lot of numbers flying around. I mean, world doesn't exist without budgets and numbers. We got to have a budget for everything. Purpose of this section is to address key items that are going to be required to successfully implement the project or intervention. It's important to explain in detail the cost and provide justification for how your activities being done are tied to your budget. Things could be way out there. Why do you guys need a deep freeze? Well, that's relevant to, we're going to be processing buffalo meat because there's a meat shortage and we need a place to store it, and it's going to be distributed to tribal members. So being able to explain and justify, your cost, your activities, to your funders, to your tribal leaders, to whoever, and it shouldn't be a big deal, a big issue around that either. Say what needs to be said and make it short and sweet. The importance of working with staff who are involved with the budget and budget preparation, finance department, your grant manager, your director. When I worked with my tribe, I worked a lot. I worked closely with our accountant, our finance accountant that handled the HHS grants, and I kept a cuff account. I kept an account on the side, any expenditures, any cost, any changes, whatever, monthly. And I would go, and once a month, I would ask her to provide me, once a quarter, I would ask her to provide me with a detailed ledger summary. And I would go and I would compare that, making sure that things were coded correctly to the right items and categories. And just having that relationship with your finance person, because they're going to have to be your friend. They're going to either make you look good or they can make you look like you're not good. So take them cookies, donuts, flowers, whatever it takes to keep them on top of, getting those forms. There's deadlines like after your grant closes, you've got 90 days to submit, your final report and all of that stuff. So making sure that those things are taken care of and giving your finance people the tools that they need and the resources to get what they need done. So very, very important to be good to them, your grant, your finance people. And going back to the budget and budget justification narrative, it should be clear and concise. It should be like telling a story. Like if you're going to go and tell your wife or your husband why you need $500 because you're going to, build something, or you want to do something for the kids, but you have to be able to justify it clearly and how they're going to benefit from it, if they are. But definitely communicate with all the people involved in the process so that it moves along, the way that it should, and be clear and be realistic about your numbers. Let me see, 11:56. Let's stop right here. I want to pause right here. I've got a few more slides that we're going to go through, and we'll definitely get that after lunch. But before we continue on, we'll stop here. We're going to take an hour for lunch, and we are going to come back at 1 o'clock Central Time. So for right now, Aaron, I'm good.
Yep, you're good to go.
You guys come back at 1 o'clock. If you have any questions, any comments, please put those in the chat and we'll get to those. we're here, so we'll look forward to seeing you guys at 1. Please enjoy your lunch. All right, guys, welcome back. That one. All right, guys, welcome back. I hope that your lunch was good and everything went good. And, you guys are back here. I am gonna just double check on a couple of things real quick. Golly. So anyway, I hope we're trying to break this thing up into little manageable pieces, because if you try to take it all in at once, it can be overwhelming. I've heard many times the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So, moving forward with budgets, there's a lot of, it can make or break you. If you don't have money, you can't do your activities, you can't do your projects. Sometimes you can have too much money and you don't have a spending plan and how to be effective with it, and you end up throwing things to see what sticks. That's not a good plan either. So you want to be strategic, you want to budget, you want to plan, you want to forecast. So the purpose of this section is to address kind of some of the items that are required that go along with implementing your project or intervention. It's important to explain the detailed costs, the justification, and how all of your activities and everything kind of jives together. It's like I mentioned earlier, being that orchestra conductor or even the automobile mechanic, and you want certain performances out of your alternator, your carburetor, your starter, and all those things working together is what propels you down the road efficiently, ideally. So understanding kind of the process of everything and how it ties in and how it operates and what impact it can have on the overall picture. Like I mentioned earlier, the importance of working with everybody that's involved with the grant and being, having that communication with your finance people, with staff, and in your justification narrative should be clear and concise. I've got an example of one that we'll pull up here shortly. Let me see. 39. Budget preparation, whenever you guys are getting ready to develop your budget, when you begin your budget, things to have in hand. Of course, you want to review the funding opportunity announcement, FOA, and see if you're qualified, if you're eligible to apply. And if you are, then, kind of proceeding into it and having that budget ready. Main thing you want to ask yourself, are you eligible to apply for the funding? Yes or no. If you got questions, reach out to the contact person that's on there and, ask questions around it, and they can tell you what they can. Some of it you may have to do some research on your own to make some determinations or check with your planning office to see, where things sit. Some of the pertinent dates for submission, you want to try to get it in a few days before the deadline, because when there's a big funding submission, you don't want to wait until the last minute and have 40 or 50 people trying to upload documents onto the server, and that can kind of cause some issues down the road. It may come out to where you don't get it in on time. So best to start early, find out if there's letters of intent, look at the timeline. Definitely be cognizant of that. If you have to use a calendar, a big project board, do it by quarter, and setting up some of those timelines that you have to stick by. Get a commitment from those that are involved in the writing process, meet with them, talk things through, divvy up, the responsibilities of the grant. You take this portion, I'll take that portion, and having that communication so that the central person understands, what is all out there, and orchestrating those pieces to get it done on time and bring them together, so that although you're going to have different people putting different pieces together, you need one oversight to make sure that everything flows, that it's speaking from that one voice, and it's not choppy or jumping around, so definitely have somebody to read it through. The outline or understanding of the grant deliverables and how your budget will align with those activities and outcomes, just understanding that and finessing that. If you know that, one of the things you need to do is develop a farmer's market, for the summer months, having the different places, the different pieces from the budget lined out so that they correspond with your activities and your outcomes, doing your drawdowns so that you'll have enough to incentivize the people that are taking the surveys or the questionnaires. You're getting the data that you need, the information that you need to feed this grant so that it can grow, it can nurture it, and communication, going back to the communication and talking with everybody and keeping them on the same page as you advance, and having items that you need that are needed, having an idea of items that are needed or the estimated cost to get those items. If you're going to need grow lights for your starter plants, for your seedlings, having an idea of that process, to put things together. Maybe it might be staff that you need. What does Department of Labor forecast the salary to be for your region, for certain positions, maybe a community health nurse or a clinical nurse, a case management, but finding those tools and resources that are going to help you to justify the numbers that you put into your budget. Always have justification, always base your numbers on, information that's currently available. Don't just pull them out of the air. Oh, I want to pay my nurses, $80,000, and I'm sure nurses are worth it, but for the region that you're at, or maybe the caseload that they're doing, the job qualifications that the position requires for, work with your HR, or, even reach out to maybe your IHS clinic to see, if wages are in line with what, the standards are for your region, but there's a lot of things that you can do through the Department of Labor to help justify those costs when you're developing your budget. Know your grant submission details, how they are going to want it. If they only want it on single side of the, the application instead of double-sided, or if they want 2-inch margins, do it. Find out if they want it submitted electronically. Do you upload? Do you do a hard copy and mail it, or is this just a brief proposal, a one-pager that covers everything? But find out how the funding agency is going to ask that it be submitted and follow that. Line items of a grant budget. Looking at these SF424s or when you're doing your budget, there's usually about 5 or 6 line items that cover everything. And in this case, we're looking at 8: personnel fringe, travel, supplies, your equipment, other, and contractual or pass through, and then indirect. We'll talk a little bit about indirect here in a minute, but in your bottom line, the total amount that you are requesting from the funding agency, it'll be a cumulative number from all of them, and make sure that you understand your tribe's indirect cost rate, Is it current? Is it negotiable? Is it going to change next year? You know, there's a lot of questions around, you know, knowing those line items of your budget, you know, whenever you start inputting them, that it may change over time. You know, you want to think about cost of living, merit increases, you know, be sure that you forecast enough in your budget if you're having to do a continuation from year to year, so that, you know, those things can be taken into consideration. You know, sometimes 2 or 3 or 5% cost of living or merit increase for your personnel, you know, being mindful of that, you know, and to recruit and retain your personnel. You know, you want to pay them well to keep them engaged, to keep them, you know, involved and a part of the program for the success of it. Same thing with your fringe benefits, you know, insurance, life, disability, short-term disability, all of those things, you know, are important for retaining good qualified staff. You know, a lot of times we, you know, people that are looking at your company, you know, they may ask, how's your benefits package? How's your fringe package? You know, why should I come to work there? You know, why should I work for you? You know, well, we've got a good 401k, we've got, you know, a wellness program, we pay for your health members. You know, those are things that your organization can kind of work through to see how you're going to recruit good qualified staff and retain them. You know, travel, GSA, you know, their rates, you can look at GSA rates and look at mileage in state. You can look at, you know, maybe you're going to rent a GSA vehicle through them and look at maintenance or gas, or, you know, how you're going to maintain that for the year. If you're going to be going out of state for travel, is it going to be in state? But try to provide as much detail on that. You know, there's per diem rates, there's hotel rates that you can use to justify your numbers through the GSA website. And if you're going to be doing in-state travel, you know, in your service area, you know, things you need to keep in mind too is keeping your staff trained and current and up to date, so that they have the best tools at their disposal to be taking care of your community. You know, you want to equip them well. Supplies, computers, you know, office equipment, those kinds of things. You know, you can have a line item for that and explain equipment. Like I said, it could be desk furniture, it could be computer equipment, office equipment, things that you may need. Other that don't fall into those categories, maybe it's gosh, other could mean a lot of different things. We'll get to that here in a bit with the finance and contractual. Sometimes you may need an evaluator. You know, how are you going to evaluate your program? You know, reaching out to you know, somebody that's qualified that can provide those services. How are you going to pay them? A lot of times that's contractual, different from personnel. Or if you want to add an evaluator to your staff, a lot of times it's ideal to keep them kind of separate, and so that, you know, there's not that undue influence. But a contractual and evaluator would look at the performance of your thing, and you can build upon that, you know, those criticisms, you might call it. But contractual pass-through funds, if you're going to sub-award a tribe, or if you're going to hire staff to come in to provide, you know, CPR classes or some kind of training for your community, or classes, you know, fitness classes. You can work through that. You can work contractual to cover things, but know that you have to be very mindful. There's a lot of rules that go around a contract employee. And I don't want to get into get down into the details with that. We'll leave that to finance, but know what a contract employee is versus, you know, a regular staff person, and understanding the differences and how you utilize that service for the benefit of your program or grant, and indirect cost, understanding that, how that number comes to be, how that's negotiated through your audit process and findings and your finance processes, and cost of different aspects of your organization. Indirect can cover things that are not in the budget. Maybe it's your if you're a nonprofit, maybe it's your executive director for the organization whose salary comes out of there. Or maybe it's, in our instance, it covers things like maintenance or bathroom supplies, toilet paper, ancillary things that are not necessarily covered under a grant, but are necessary for the housing of your, finance is another thing that's paid out of indirect. Finance department can be paid out of grant funds through indirect to help offset those costs, and then finally having the total amount that you're requesting after all of that. There's ways to kind of come up for that. I think I went through a lot of this stuff, your personnel, what does it cost for good qualified help, how you're going to retain that, how are you going to advertise, that's something that can come out of, your contractual, your fringe. It could come out of a different line item that you're recruiting for qualified personnel. And how do you base your salaries? Are they exempt, non-exempt? Are they hourly or salary, full-time, part-time, benefits, and just knowing the ins and outs, I guess, and working with your HR. Are you going to require drug testing? Different rates for different types of employees, the percentages, go into that. And the fringe, talking about that again, I told you it's something that your employer offers you that is above and beyond your annual salary or other wages. I mentioned it could be a variety of things to recruit and retain good help. Your retirement benefits, those are getting important. Health and dental insurance, bonuses, if there is a thing, and paid time off. A lot of people will ask, well, I've got a family and my kids are school age, and, do we accrue leave? Can we have time to go take part in those things? So those are good things to know and have as an attractive portion of your recruitment endeavors, is to know what your fringe benefits can bring in relation to recruitment of good staff, if that makes sense. And I have that asterisk there at the bottom. It can affect your organization or entity's ability to attract and retain, good staff. That's somebody knows they're good. If they're good and it, you're going to pay. You're going to pay to get them. So you want to be kind of prepared and have that available in your budget to explain. Other budget line items, your travel, indicate why it's necessary for you to have to go. Maybe the grant calls for an annual meeting or a training, or maybe you meet quarterly, but you need to be able to narrate that in your line item, and have those numbers available. Talk about GS rates, the mileage that it's going to take maybe to go out and do your case management or visit with, people in your community to get this project off the ground. You talk about meetings, conferences, trainings, and how they're tied to your goals and objectives. Keep everything relevant, everything around. Don't, hey, we want to go to Las Vegas for, some training on personnel management, or recruitment, but when actually maybe that's a HR, issue that they do, but keep it relevant to what the goals and objectives are for your program, for your grant. Supplies, I mentioned, what supplies are necessary for you to do, for your community surveys, for your office supplies, all relevant in the supply field. You know, you need paper for your copying machine, you need service agreements to keep your copier running. You know, that could be under equipment, computer equipment, tablets, supplies. You know, if you need tablets to carry out surveys through SurveyMonkey in the community, you know, make sure that you write that in. You know, find out what, maybe you can buy them in bulk and get a really great deal, you know, but be able to justify why you want to utilize that type of technology for whatever, you know, area that you're doing, you know. Utilizing consultants, it's necessary for carrying out your objectives, your evaluation, your training needs. You know, maybe you need a consultant to come in and talk about third-party billing and helping, you know, the ins and outs with that. Or we need a subject matter expert that can talk to us about community engagement or cultural competency. You know, get somebody to educate you on you know, the culture of the community that you're targeting. You know, but they can be used in a variety of ways to help finesse your program, your grant, and definitely use them, you know, utilize them to help empower and prop things up. You know, and it all depends on your grant requirements and your own, you know, programmatic internal capacities. And don't be afraid, you know, to lean on other programs if they have that. You know, we would lean a lot on, you know, one particular program because their director was certified to teach CPR, you know, and they did that as a service to help the other programs, you know, that. So things like that, leaning on each other, getting your internal capacities so that you can help other programs, you know, and you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, you know, type of arrangement so that, you know, you can advance what you're doing. And then, like I mentioned earlier, direct costs, you know, indirect costs, overhead expenses, rent, utilities. Sometimes you can tease that out and pay space cost, you know, a line item for that, for your utilities. They could be general or administrative costs, like I said, with HR, accounting, you know, maintenance. They may get paid out of indirect, you know, to help keep the bathrooms clean, help keep the floors mopped, keep the sidewalks cleared, you know. So understanding what that indirect cost covers, how it's negotiated, how often do you do it, you know, those are very relevant questions to know in your approach towards grant writing and understanding, you know, having a little bit of knowledge about all these different areas. I am going to pull sample budget template up real quick. Erin, I'm going to need your help. All right, guys, bear with me here. Okay. Bear with me here. Let me see. There we are. Can you see that? There. Okay. Okay, guys. This is just, you know, when we go about doing our budgets, you know, there's a lot of, there's some very talented people out there that can put these spreadsheets together in a heartbeat with formulas and everything. And we were fortunate because one of our, you know, our folks came up with this budget, and it's really helpful. But if you look up here, upper right, we've got program name. If we want to call this the Buffalo, I don't know, I'm making this up off the top of my head. But these are things that's going to be relevant. You know, your budget period, 9/31 through 9/29/22. You know, your funding period, having that kind of stuff. Your funding year, it might be FY 22, or it might be year one. So it just depends. But you put your amount that you're funding, that's what your total amount is. You applied for a grant for $100,000 to do this Buffalo initiative. You're going to need a field person. How much are you, their name, we don't know. Annual salary, we're going to pay them, $30,000 a year. They're going to be 100% full-time, and that's going to, but knowing, your parameters, your part-time, full-time, if this person was only going to be 50%, that would reflect on that amount that comes through. But, and also sometimes you can do cost sharing of staff and stuff like that, but finessing that, your fringe benefits, sometimes they may be at 25% of what their salary is. That's not unreasonable because of the cost of health insurance and 401ks and the employer contributions and stuff like that. So that's probably an ideal number, of what the fringe benefits are, 25% of your salary, putting in details like in-state, whatever, traveling in-state or out of state, just going through here, 15,000 and putting everything together, but what you want to do, here's all these portions that I talked about, your personnel, your fringe, your travel. Here's one on supplies, general office supplies, postage, software, computers, printers, training materials. Those are things that you're going to need, and it's okay to kind of detail that out on what you're going to need if it's for your, you need office supplies, for the office, just putting random numbers in. Postage, software is big, sometimes, you need those. We use Zoom, there's Monday, project boards, things that you may need. You may need training materials, keep your staff or your community members updated. There's media buys. You may want to, buy newspaper articles. You may want to buy, target particular sectors of the community or population through media buys and targeting newspapers or television ads, whatever media is. Speaker fees. Keep in mind, this is contractual. It's what they call pass-through, so it's not going to have indirect cost added to it. But speaker fees, if you're going to have a conference, if you're going to have a training, putting that fee into there, maybe what you're going to pay them. Graphic design, maybe you need a logo for your program or department, getting somebody. These are just random things that are relevant. Those names can change, those line items can change, but they would still be under contractual. Facilitators, who's going to facilitate your strategic, 5-year planning. You want to bring somebody in, or, maybe you can send some of your staff to training and get them certified to be a facilitator. That's a strength too, but finessing that, coming on down to other, you need communications, there's cell phone, copying, printing. Just yesterday I had to take some curriculum to get printed up at a, it was kind of a big job. I needed 3 of the books. So, took it there to get printed up and was able to pay for it through PEX cards, working with finance to get those things done instead of, putting in a purchase order, waiting on a check request and going through all that process. Things are really streamlined. You think about incentives. Let's see. On ours, it's got a TEC conference. Our organization, a lot of you guys may or may not be aware, but we do an annual tribal public health conference in April of every year, with the exception of this year and last year, they went virtual. But annually, we do a tribal public health conference here in Oklahoma, and we attract people from all over the country. It's just getting bigger and bigger, but putting aside funds for that, to bring in speakers on relevant topics, that's kind of what we keep that out there for. there's one here, a line item for incentives and promotional items. And that could be used for recruitment and retention of, surveys. If you're going to do questionnaires, you want to incentivize people. Lancer mentioned, not being afraid to, hear the good, the bad, and the ugly about your project, getting good qualitative feedback on what's going on out in the community, and I'm not saying that, you got to pay them to get that information, but it's helpful. It's, and it helps offset sometimes people's time or their money, their management, or it may help them go down the road a little bit further. But just kind of keeping that in mind, that that's how you can finesse that, for recruitment of things and retention, the long term. The next line item, registration fees for staff training. Conferences, registration fees, training fees, you got to keep that in mind, so how much that's going to cost. On here I had total direct costs, 68,000. My direct cost, my indirect was 21, which is 31.1% of that. Comes up to direct cost 89. So you want to try to bring those numbers more in line with, with what you're trying to do. Getting pretty close, so that you don't want to add too much more funds to get that close to zero. But this is a sample for a budget template that we use, and we're happy to share this. This will be part of the resources that we put together for this particular training that you will be able to access. So if you need a sample budget template, you need to throw one together, feel free. It's got formulas in it. You may need to go in and change some of those formulas to reflect what's accurate for your organization or whatever, but it's good. It's good to be able to have those. I'm going to turn that off real quick. So everybody's still with me. Yay. Let me see. Hold on. Close that out. Go back to my. Is that the right one, Aaron? All right. I have to double check. So that was the let me jump to the next one here. So with the budget narrative, I talked a little bit about that, but the budget narrative is where you write the story. You got to be a good writer. If you're going to be a grant writer, you got to have your grammar, your punctuation. You got to be able to narrate, tell your story about how you're going to utilize the funds, how you're going to utilize these funds to advance your project, your goals, your objectives, to complete it, your program, to get it done. You tell the story about how your personnel is tied to the stability of your project, how, keeping them properly trained, keeping them up to date and current, it balances out these other costs that you're doing. You have to be able to just kind of look through your cost of living, keeping an eye on, consumer price index, fringe benefits, other factors. We had COVID that affected a lot of things. There was unemployment benefits that came out. There was people that, it affected people in a lot of different ways that maybe we're still, trying to fathom the impacts of COVID. So, but having a good idea of the budget narrative and the story that it tells as you go through your project, and how you want it, what kind of story you want it to tell, and like I keep mentioning, your fringe helps you to recruit and retain good qualified personnel, so keep that in mind as you go forward and building this. Small example of budget narrative, the Happy-Go-Lucky Health Board, Tribal Health Board. This is just a small example, couple of paragraphs of a budget narrative. You know, you're requesting funding for this good health and wellness in Indian country. We're the happy-go-lucky health board. You talk about your indirect costs, you know, where we're at. And you go through your line items. You talk about your personnel. You're going to hire, you know, 10% is going to fund the TEC director, or the, you know, he's going to donate 10% of his time to 27.5 to oversight of the grant. You have a grant lead, you know, a tobacco person, $95,000. Oh my goodness, they are well paid. But you know, and knowing what these costs are and how it ties in relation to their benefits, their taxes, you know, all that stuff, and having a bottom line number. You know, with this case, with fringe benefits and personnel, you're looking at 75,000, and you know, your fringe benefit package. You know, we talked about having those things together: health, life, dental, short, long-term disability insurance, 401k. You know, the Section 125 cafeteria plan, paid leave. How, you know, it's always interesting. You know, I'm always, you know, I was always interested, you know, how much leave do I accrue a month, you know, and asking those kinds of questions, you know, to know that when you step into this role, what can I expect, you know, as a staff. So having a good narrative and of an idea and how that's going to work, and the numbers that are going to play into it, you know, moving forward. Talk about your travel. It's required to meet your objectives and your work plan in state, out state. You know, there's tribal community events that you've got to attend. There's, you know, maybe an annual tribal public health conference that you've got to participate in, you know, and talk a little bit about GSA rates, the mileage, the flights. You don't have to have, you know, you don't have to have specific numbers at the time, you know, pretty general. Try to have those as close to it as you can. If you need to guesstimate, round up, you know, if a flight's $299, you know, say $300, you know. Same thing with hotels, you know, just kind of keeping an eye on how much that's going to run, and the per diem. You know. After the budget and stuff like that, which the management plan kind of covers the budget plan as well. It covers a lot of different areas, how you're going to manage all these pieces, you know, your goals, objectives, your recruitment, your budgeting, your evaluation. This is where you talk about your management plan, how you're going to manage your grant, your qualified staff, talk about how they're recruited, you know, job descriptions, include those. If the staff hasn't been recruited yet, you know, if you've got general job descriptions, include them, you know, so that they'll have an idea, you know, show what the qualifications are for that. Talk about the project, that how long it's going to be. You know, talk about your collaborations. You know, maybe you have an existing relationship with Redlands Community College, and you know, they have an equine science program that's going to work with your staff to provide, you know, maybe something cultural to deal with historical trauma. You know, I mean, there's no rule that says you can't do this or you can't do that. You know, you are in charge of how you develop and build these relationships for the benefit of your community or your people. You know, talk about how you're going to go about working with environmental factors to get your program going. You know, procuring these contracts, these agreements, you know, to do pass-through funding or to do sub-awards. You know, there's a lot of contractual information. There's people that you've got to talk to, identifying staff within other organizations or tribes, getting contracts in place, signatures. You got to have time for those. So having an idea of how you're going to go about getting all these things, you know, office space, are you going to all be together? Are you going to work remote? You know, but everything that you need to build a good foundation for your program. You know, internet technology needs. I know that, you know, for some of our tribes, you know, we're rural based. Technology is getting better out there, but, you know, I guarantee you there's still a lot of places I can go to in Western Oklahoma that I have zero internet or reception, sometimes I like it. But talking about those, maybe you know that 5G is coming to your neighborhood, or fiber optic, and you want to expand, but definitely focus on the foundation of your program. Just like with a house, or anything that you're going to build, you want to build a good foundation, a good working foundation that's going to be able to flex and grow and support these endeavors that you're going to do. And all of them, they all work together, they complement each other, they work in tandem, how you can tie them together to build off of that. But definitely focus on the foundation of your support, knowing what your resources are, knowing your strengths and your capabilities, and building on those. You also want to talk about how you'll utilize your budget, your program goals and objectives, how you're going to finesse those. Talk about a timeline. It's going to take me a year to, we're building up, we're going to do some this is a capacity building time. The first year we're going to get our staff trained on the current, CDC requirements for, implementing a best practices curriculum. Talk about that timeline. Who's going to be responsible for implementing that? Who are you going to identify? Who's your key staff? Who's your support staff? Talk about those things. Talk about how you're going to just orchestrate everything to advance what you're doing. Golly. Anybody have any idea where this could be? This was a road that I was headed to, driving north of Gunnison, Colorado, which I'm going to be doing here in about another week. It's a road that heads north of Gunnison, up in the Rockies, and pine trees. I'm taking a break, guys. We're going to take a break from all the screen and stuff like that. So we're going to go up into the mountains. Every few years, I take a trip up to Colorado, and we go up and we cut teepee poles. We get permits, and it's just like a grant or a program. You think about a program that you're going to implement, and I've got a time frame. I've got a year that I'm going to do this. I'm going to go up there, and I know that I need to get a permit. Who do I talk to? Who are the people around it? Are they still going to be there? And planning around that timeline, I had to start getting my permit for this teepee pole application way back in April. The logging roads up in the mountains were not even open yet. And, I'm already contacting them saying, hey, let's get this permit thing in place, so that I can go up, So, where am I going to stay? How am I going to get these poles? What equipment am I going to use? There's just so many details that you have to kind of plan accordingly, personnel, staffing, COVID's going on. I got friends, people that were going to go that are having to drop out because, COVID, somebody in their family got COVID and they got to isolate or something, so working through and working, around those issues, hopefully will, produce something fruitful. But it's a lot of effort. It is a lot of effort. Anything worthwhile is not going to be easy, So, whenever you're looking at a forest here in front of you, and you see just so many, it's overwhelming, but what do you do, After we procured some of our poles, cut them, we start loading them. I talked about in my equipment that I have to use to get them down here, get from Colorado to Oklahoma. So, I got my trailer. I got to talk about safety. I got, do I have spare tires? Not in my belly, but on the vehicle. But, what if you get a flat tire? You know, you got to have a backup plan for that. You know, what if you get pulled over? Well, I've got the permit, I've got the tags for that. You know, what happens when I get back home? Where am I going to put them? Who's going to scrape them? You know, got to ask questions. You know, you got to plan this stuff out. You know, there's our solution. When I got my poles back to Oklahoma, my dad was waiting, and you know, that old man got to work. He started stripping those poles and spent a lot of hours out there. And it's not easy. You know, it takes maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes to strip a pole. And typical set of teepees, you've got, you know, 19, you know, 28-foot poles, and you got to strip all of them. You got to cure them. You know, you got to treat them so that you'll have them for a while. But, you know, engaging in a project like that, you know, you got to kind of think it out. You got to plan it, and it's not easy, you know. And the evaluation part, it's like for me and my teepee, you know, my evaluation is whenever I take that teepee out there to the powwow or to the ceremonies, and I start putting up my poles and I start putting my teepee up, you know, and naturally everybody's going to come over. People are going to come over. They're going to look at your poles. Where'd you get those? Are they straight? Those look crooked. You know, that one's not straight. You know, they'll start picking them apart, you know, but there's your evaluation. Don't be afraid of criticism, like Lancer was saying. You know, that's the only way that you're going to improve. So, you know, being able to take those criticisms about what you say that you're going to do, and being able to build upon that. So with your grant, you know, your objectives to your stated goal, how relevant are they? You know, do they relate to it? Are they time, you know, sensitive? You know, do they help advance what you're trying to do? You know, there's so many things that you can build that evaluation around it. You know, myself, you know, when it came to people critiquing my teepee poles, I improved. You know, I got better about how I stripped them and cured them, or maybe it was, you know, how I put my teepee up. You know, but it's definitely a reflection of what you do, your work that you do. You know, people can come from a distance and they see a teepee. Oh wow, that looks nice. But you start getting up close and you start, you know, you know, looking at it with a microscope, you know, oh wow, you know, this side scraped more than the other side, or you missed that, you missed, you know. So, you know, it's good to have critique, it's good to build, you know, but know that looking at things from afar and coming up and having a really, you know, looking at it objectively through a microscope, you know, there can be some really eye-opening things. Looking at the cost associated with your objectives, you know, are they reasonable? Are they, you know, prudent? They, you know, funding agencies always want you to be frugal with your funds, you know, get bids, you know, maybe it's a sole source that only one person can provide that, but still research that, you know, find out other regions, other areas, you know, is there something else besides sole source that we can use to supplement that, or maybe it's, you know, it's the only one that you can do, but look at the cost of what you're trying to do and how much it's going to cost to carry out your objectives, and look, is there anything better that I can do? Maybe you can cut corners or cut costs, you know, and apply them for other areas, you know, or do, you know, add on extra objectives or something like that, you know, to make things more streamlined, more efficient. And always pay attention to the progress that's being made on your objectives, you know, just kind of having your instrument cluster, your gauges, your dials, monitoring your oil pressure, your engine temperature, your fuel gauge, you know, as you're getting closer to your, you know, your goal or your destination, and knowing, you know, all right, my gas gauge is a quarter empty, you know, I still got 300 miles to go, I need to fill up, you know, or, you know, something like that, you know, but always be aware of the progress that you're making towards your objectives, because, you know, you have to provide quarterly reports, monthly, you know, you want to keep people updated in what's going on with things. I think I might be getting kind of close, guys. So your evaluation approach, I mentioned earlier, you heard Lance earlier, he's going to talk a little bit about evaluation tomorrow, but on Thursday, young lady, Janice Campbell, Dr. Janice Campbell from University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center is going to come and talk a little bit on evaluation, a little bit more in depth, and why it's relevant and why it's important. You know, as I was getting this presentation together and taking a deeper dive into the evaluation approach, you know, I learned a lot. I try to make these as much of a learning experience going into it as I do, you know, passing on some of that information. So, you know, like I said, you be aware of how your evaluation aligns with your strategies of your grant, and be prepared to talk about that, you know, narrate on it, you know, use your language, use your, you know, adjectives, and talk positive about how this is going to align, you know, talk about how and when your stakeholders are going to be involved in the evaluation aspect of it. You know, maybe you're going to bring the, you know, the survey results to the community and let them know, you know, where things stand. You know, we did a community health survey for one of the tribes, and after they collected all of the surveys and went through them, input them, analyzed them, came up with different charts and graphics for the different questions, you know, they came and they circled back and they presented to the tribal legislators and the tribal government, and told them, you know, this is your population, this is your community. And it was an excellent learning opportunity for them, because going into it, you know, you want to know the status of your community, you know, just like with our own health, you know, our own personal health, you want to know the health of your community. You know, are they gentrifying? You know, is it gentrifying? You know, is there a baby boom? You know, how's the water? You know, you look at different aspects and how you can kind of tweak that community to get the best health you can for them, you know, but with the evaluation, that is the part that's going to come back and tell you if your processes that you have in place are adequate, and if they're giving you the feedback that you need to tweak your program. You know, elaborate on how you intend to disseminate the findings of your evaluation to your stakeholders. You know, we talked a little bit about that. You know, what we do is sometimes we'll, you know, we help our tribal partners if they want to develop, you know, poster presentations for different conferences or events. You know, my suggestion was for these programs to develop a poster presentation about their program, their objectives, their community that they're working out, and maybe some of the results or finding, and put that up here at your tribe, your administration building, present it to your tribal leaders, your legislators, about, you know, your program, your findings, about the good work that they're doing. Maybe you need funding to get a little bit further down the road. You know, maybe they can advocate for you, but definitely disseminate those findings. You know, if there's an annual tribal council meeting, you know, put those results out there, let them know, you know, you guys took part in a survey 9 months ago, and these are the results. You know, we told you that we would come back. You know, with community engagement, I kind of circle back to community engagement and talk about that, giving ownership to the community, to the, you know, that you're serving. You know, it shouldn't be a 50-50. It should be a 51-49, a 60-40. You know, that community should own the majority and have the majority say. You know, they should have input in the design of your program. You know, maybe something that they want to see or something that they wish they would see. We want more sidewalks. You know, these are where you go out, you do your surveys, your questionnaires, and you come back and you find out the needs of your community. You build on that, you move forward like that, you know, but be prepared to talk about that in your evaluation and how those numbers you will use to come back and pour back into your program for better results, you know, for better long-term results. Types of evaluation, there's formative, It tests different aspects of your programming, your staff, your office space, time materials, little detail things. Survey questions appropriate, that you're moving along at a steady rate, that things are good for what, you're doing at the time. It's usually done early on in the program to make sure that you're headed down the right direction. And if not, what you can do to mitigate, and refocus your strategy to be more appropriate for, your goals, your long-term goals and objectives. Another type of evaluation is the process evaluation. It goes more into the, the detail and does a deep dive into your program objectives. It gets down into the finer details. We talk about getting down into the weeds with things. This is, it helps determine if your program is properly implemented, taken off the ground and moving forward. Very, very detailed about, your assessment of your program activities. And it might feel almost, personal with them getting into that thing, but because, you're trying to put your life, your hard work, your blood, sweat, tears into this grant or this program and make it successful. But here's somebody that, we hired that we don't even know. They're coming in, they're trashing my program, but being able to take those criticisms constructively and apply them so that you can advance or make things better, and then your outcome or impact evaluation, it can be long-term, it could be short-term, looking for changes, are people more apt to want to get out and walk on the sidewalks that were built, or not? Why not? Maybe there's too many mosquitoes, maybe it's too hot, maybe there's, maybe signage. But these are things that can maybe tell you that maybe you can tweak and it'll help. You never know. We worked with one lady up in Northeast Oklahoma that they did a survey. Nobody knew about their walking trail. They had this really neat level, really nice walking trail that went around a small pond, and it was very, very nice. And she was kind of bummed because nobody knew that they had it. They did an assessment, they did questionnaires, and that was the results. What walking trail? So it came back and it told them, hey, we need to advertise this. We need to promote this walking trail. So they signage putting up notices, having, fun walks, getting employee wellness programs to get out there, or collaborating with schools, walk with an elder program, but those are things, through evaluation, and finding out of your shortcomings and how you can tweak things to kind of help for the long term, for better outcomes, but including appropriate measures that can include changes in behavior, knowledge, attitude, your health conditions or your quality of life. Maybe you just want to increase, consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, or you want them to, you don't necessarily want them to lose weight or lower their A1C, but you want to have a better quality of life, a better, happiness. People are happier, they're going to want to do things that make them feel more like that. Lastly, I think earlier I mentioned a Dunn's number. A little bit, it was on that application that we looked at, the SF424, putting in that information, but the Dunn's number, it was a required number. I think it was an 8 or 9 digit number that identified your agency, your tribe, your organization, and whenever we come up with cooperative agreements, when we do civil wars with some of our tribal partners, we require the Dunn's number, and it's just something that it's your unique identity, so that we know who we're talking about. And the Dunn's number will be going away, I believe, in the near future. 2022 is the date that I think I seen where it's going to be going away. And organizations, whenever you go register with sam.gov, that's when that will be switched over and moved over to the new unique entity ID. So that's going to affect all of us that apply for funding that, you know, new change. So maybe through evaluation, they found out that those numbers from the Duns were confusing and people were getting confused. So they suggested maybe we go to a different number. So that was a type of evaluation. Lastly, you know, you want to think about when you're putting together your grant application packet, you know, pay attention to their details, what they put on there. You know, it depends, you know, like I said, if they want it, you know, the numbers labeled 1, 3, 5, 7, you know, only odd numbers, put only odd numbers, you know, but they're not going to be that crazy. Follow all the instructions to the letter, the margins, the fonts, the style, and just follow the instructions. You know, that's about all that I can say on when you submit that. A lot of times we have to submit those electronically, so it's just a matter of uploading those documents, scanning them in, you know, to whatever format, PDF usually, and having those on, you know, on a thumb drive or whatever available and ready to upload, you know, for submission. And make sure that there at the end you get a confirmation once you upload and you hit submit. Get a confirmation. You know, start early, get a confirmation, and you know, just kind of be aware. Keep an eye on it. Oh, 50 more slides. I'm teasing. Really, you know, I know that wasn't really a real deep dive into grant management. Like I said, you know, if you guys want to really get into it, you know, myself, I took a grant writing class in college. It was like 2 weekends, you know, and I actually got credit for it, college credit, but very valuable. A lot of organizations like ours, you know, there's other tribal epicenters, there's other entities that will put on grant writing trainings, you know, specific for tribes, tribal governments. You know, it may be general grant writing trainings, but you know, there's definitely a variety out there. It matters on what type of funding that you're going, you know, transportation grants, tribal transportation might be different. BIA funding may be different for, you know, social service grants, but, you know, there are some basics, you know, with assembling, with the narrative, with the budgets, and being familiar with those portions. You know, when I talk about your grant, your ideas being translatable or transferable to other areas, so is grant writing. You know, I feel like, you know, you get good training and stuff like that, and you start, you know, it's a skill that you develop. It's a muscle that you keep using, keep flexing enough, you know, we'll have a big muscle there going. So, you know, that is where we're at today. Tomorrow, Dr. Stevens Lancer is going to be talking. He's going to give his perspective of grant writing. You know, kind of thinking this through, you know, we don't want to give you just our way and that's it. We want you to have different perspectives, different viewpoints, you know, where people are at different parts of writing grants. Lancer does a lot of reviewing. He's written a lot of grants. He teaches it. Usually during our tribal public health conference, you know, we do put on a grant writing training, a pre-conference training, but we've kind of switched that format. So now we're going to be doing this. So this training that you guys are on today, that the Horizons or Healthy Humana, this grant writing training, it's something that we're going to be doing in the fall annually, it looks like, and then offset that to the spring. We do our tribal public health conference in the spring, and we have, you know, it's not a training place. That's more for, you know, tribal public health to come out and present, you know, but hopefully, you know, like I said, getting some of your grants, your programs and stuff like that, to toot your horn, come out, show your results, talk about your program, talk about the good things that go with it. You'll catch somebody's eye. Who knows? You don't know who's going to be at these conferences. Somebody may be saying, wow, that is a really good idea. How can we fund that? You never know, or you may be sharing an idea or something that happened, and you might help somebody else out, so I think grant writing is a really, really good way. So just a couple of different perspectives. You'll hear Lancer tomorrow, and Thursday, Janice is going to talk a little bit about the evaluation part, and then we're going to have the grant management aspect of it with a couple of our finance ladies and another one of our coordinators, that grant managers that deals with sub-awardees and finance and all those particulars that go with it. But, grant management, grant writing, it's a very good skill set to have, whenever, you get into programmatic activities and stuff like that. So I am going to stop sharing. I think you're Aaron Spain. All right.
So Chris, I think you're kind of wrapping up for today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, I'm glad that we had this discussion, and we have 2 more days of this. Now, tomorrow I'll be leading the discussion, but I'm going to call for input from people that are in the attendance. With that being said, so those that are going to be back tomorrow, I want you to do some homework for me in preparation of tomorrow. And here's the homework. You don't have to think too hard about it, but what is it within your organization, your tribe, that makes you unique? Because as Chris alluded to, this is actually pretty important whenever you're writing a grant. You have to have something that makes you stand apart from others. And so I want you to think about that. What is that uniqueness about you, your program, your population, etc. Secondly, I also want you to think about, where do you usually go, or how do you receive information about the grants that are out there? There's multiple ways, and Chris went through a bunch of them, but I'm also, I like to learn from people in attendance. And so if there's some other source for grants out there that I'm unaware of, I'd like to be aware of that as well. And I think that we should share information. I do have a list of quite a few that I utilize, but again, I know that there's more out there than just what I have. And so we'll share that information tomorrow as well. And lastly, as Chris had mentioned, grant writing is a skill. It's something that you have to develop, and honestly, it changes. I mean, we've had a rather drastic change within the past 5-10 years, from going from the paper copies to now everything being digital. And so for those that are not familiar with the digital format and things like that, it can be overwhelming in that manner. But that's the way things are going forward. And so again, if you want to dip your toe into the grant writing process, you have to become familiar with that. And not only that, but as Chris mentioned, the evaluation portion is now online as well. And Dr. Campbell will be able to talk a little bit more about that on Thursday. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about what it's like to write the grant, but also to review the grant. What are those grant reviewers thinking? And again, this alludes back to why I wanted you to think about your uniqueness. But what are those grant reviewers looking for? And how can you utilize that as a strength in your writing and in your grant application? So it'll be I don't envision us taking the entire 4 hours. We'll definitely go until noon, and then we'll come back and I'll go over some tidbits and whatnot. But we should be ending probably, after little round 2, as we did today as well. So that's your homework for tonight. Again, I don't expect anyone to write anything down, but just have it in the back of your mind of, if you're called upon, and Embry, I'm looking at you, if you're called upon to give response, I'm going to want you to at least have something to say.
All right. Lancer's gonna be covering for me tomorrow. I've got to go and be a schoolboy tomorrow. It's my first day of class as a student. So definitely getting out of my element. I'm used to anthropology stuff, but this semester I'm taking something in Native American art history. So way out of my bounds. So we'll be able to hopefully stretch that imagination. But you guys enjoy Dr. Stevens tomorrow. And if you guys have any questions, please reach out and let us know. And, you know, definitely fill out that evaluation, the survey for the day, if that's what comes through, and give us your feedback. Let us know how we can improve, you know, just like what we're talking about on this, you know, presentation and the evaluation. The only way we're going to know how to improve is from feedback from you guys. So thank you for your time. And if you guys have anything else, you know, let us know, and we'll look forward to seeing your happy, shiny faces tomorrow. Stahasawam. Guys, have a good day. Thank you.